My name is Jeff Morgan. I am from Dallas, Texas. Today is September the 10th, 2023. This is National Grandparents' Day. And to all the grandparents out there, I just want to wish you a happy day. Hope all of you get to spend time with your grandchildren. You perform a very needed and essential service to our society by being good grandparents to grandchildren. You provide something that parents cannot provide. You provide love in a different way. You provide, whether it's spoiling children or whatever, grandchildren or whatever it may be, there is something very special about you that our society often forgets and neglects. Too often in our state legislatures, we have laws that are in effect that basically make it difficult for grandparents to grandparent their children the way that they should. Often after divorce, a grandparent or an entire side of a family may be kicked out of a child's life due to antiquated and unjust, immoral child custody laws that take place. And I speak particularly about this in the state of Texas. I know the state of Texas is probably better than any other state, and I can say that the state of Texas has some terrible, terrible laws regarding grandparents. Governor Greg Abbott talked about, grandparents during COVID, but at the other hand, he's never talked about what the state has done to really disincentivize and often to punish grandparents when children go through divorce or something along those lines. There's many people in society that want to say, grandparents, you aren't that important, you aren't that essential. Kids need parents, not grandparents. Kids need both parents and grandparents. Again, grandparents provide a special and a different type of love and nurture and identity to the child that a parent often can't provide. Personally, I know that had it not been for my grandparents, I would not be the person that I am today. The grandparents step up in situations where parents may not be able to be there. Grandparents love their grandchildren often in a way, and maybe even more than they love their own children. I've heard many children say, how come you treat your grandchildren like this? You certainly didn't treat us this way. I've heard children say, something happened to my parents. They never treated me the way that they treated their grandchildren. And that's probably true to some degree, to a large degree, with many grandparents. Anyway, grandparents have a very special and important role that often goes unacknowledged, unappreciated in our society, even unappreciated within our churches. I've heard many churches say, well, grandparents are fine and stuff like that, but we really need to focus upon the parents. It's not an either or, it is a both and. Biblically speaking, grandparents had a wonderful responsibility to help provide nurture and admonition, to provide lessons from the past to their grandchildren. You can look at the book of Deuteronomy, where God basically tells grandparents to teach not just their children, but their children's children. This is the responsibility that we have, and too often our state policies and divorce industry policies interfere with us from being able to interact with our grandchildren, to teach them, to nurture them, to love them. I also want to read an article that I found in the AARP, the Association for the Advancement of Retired People. What it says is this: it says Americans 50 and older would be the world's third largest economy, AARP study finds. The age group also creates jobs, providing caregiving, and builds opportunities for all. This was written by Kenneth Terrell, AARP, December 19th, 2019. So this article, even though it's a few years old, I think that its insights are still very valuable to today. What he did at this time, he took a look at the U.S. 50-plus population, and he compared it to national economies. So the United States economy was about $20.5 trillion is what it was accounted for. The China economy, $13.4 trillion. The U.S. economy for the age demographic of 50 and older contributed $8.3 trillion of economic benefits. That surpassed Japan at $5 trillion, Germany at $4 trillion, and the United Kingdom's at $2.8 trillion. That's for the gross domestic product in 2018. These are the numbers that we're looking at. The article continues by saying the economic contributions of 50-plus Americans totaled $8.3 trillion last year. Again, this is written in 2019, talking about the year 2018, which puts them just behind the United States and China when measured by gross domestic product. And that economic impact will continue to grow significantly in decades to come, tripling to more than $28 trillion by 2050 as millennials and Generation Z begin to turn 50 in 2031 and 2047, respectively, the report finds. People aged 50 and older also contributed $745 billion worth of unpaid activities in 2018. Grandparents, you are not insignificant. You should never be relegated to a position of unimportance in your grandchildren's life, and you certainly do not have a position of unimportance in economic terms in the United States economy. You contributed in 2018 $745 billion worth of unpaid activities in ways which broadly benefit society. Your activities as a grandparent benefits your grandchildren. Your economic activities in America benefits our society. Your unpaid economic activities in America benefit society. They provide caregiving for loved ones, help to raise grandchildren, volunteer their time, and support charities. And I really want to again focus on this whole idea of today being Grandparents' Day. Grandparents, you are important, you are essential to the lives of your grandchildren. As the number of people over 50 grows, the age cohort is transforming markets and sparking new ideas, products, and services across our economy, AARP CEO Joanne Jenkins said. And as people extend their work lives, they are fueling economic growth past the traditional retirement age. They earn wages, spend more money, generate tax revenue, give back to social causes, and create demand for products and services that stimulate job growth. Once again, grandparents, you have a very significant role in our society. You are some of the people that provide economic growth in our society. You are not insignificant in our economy. You should not be treated insignificantly as being important in your grandchildren's lives. And I speak this both to the state legislature and to our churches. Our churches have miserably failed in many instances to talk about the importance of grandparents. I looked today online to see if maybe a church would be talking about grandparents on Grandparents' Day. Nothing that I could see at this point. Now, there may be something out there that I'm not aware of. I'm sure there probably is. But if it were Father's Day, we'd be talking about fathers. If it were Mother's Day, we'd be talking about mothers. Here it is Grandparents' Day, National Grandparents' Day. And from what I've seen, a lot of churches are not talking about grandparents and the importance of grandparents in the lives of their grandchildren. This, once again, is a biblical exhortation, biblical teaching, and our churches are neglecting this teaching. To go back to the economic part of things and the longevity economy, the Longevity Economy Outlook report draws on national data of how many people aged 50 and older spend, earn working, and pay in taxes. The information was used to project the group's effects on the economy overall. People aged 50 plus contributed more than $9 trillion in economic and unpaid activities in 2018, says AARP Executive Vice President and Chief Public Policy Officer Deborah Whitman. The Longevity Economy Outlook demonstrates the sheer magnitude of older Americans' contributions to all of society. There are 4 key findings in particular that she focused on. Number 1, people aged 50 and above are a growing economic engine that benefits society now and in the future. She has a graph in here going from 2018 expanding out to 2050, showing the gross domestic product that Americans aged 50 and above contribute. In 2018, it was $8.3 trillion. By 2030, it will be $12.9 trillion. 2040, $19.1 trillion. 2050, $28.2 trillion to the gross domestic product from Americans aged 50 and older. Grandparents, you are important as an economic force. You are, as it said earlier, if you look at GDP, you account for more GDP than Japan and Germany and the UK. You are third only to the United States and to China in 2018. And your power is going to continue to increase. Contrary to the widespread view of older populations as an economic burden, the report clearly shows that older adults are not a drain on society, but a growing demographic that is transforming markets and is a key driver of economic growth, innovation, and new value creation, benefiting people of all ages, says Jean Atias, Senior Vice President for thought leadership and internal affairs for AARP, who led the research behind the report. The dramatic increase in the number of people 50 and older in the United States has helped make them an economic juggernaut. An economic juggernaut. Grandparents, you are an economic juggernaut. And by the way, grandparents, some of you are under the age of 50. So you can include yourself in this demographic if you would like to. You are an economic juggernaut. You should not be neglected and ignored by our society. And when it comes down to the impact, the crucial role that you play in the lives of your grandchildren, you should not be relegated to a secondary or tertiary place. You should be acknowledged for the important contributions that you provide to them. The group now includes 4 generations: the GI generation, the silent generation, the boomers, and some members of Gen X, while the first millennials will turn 50 in just over a decade. More people are living longer, healthier lives, which lets them continue to work and contribute to the economy. There are more than 117 million Americans 50 and older. 35% of the total population in the age bracket is projected to grow to 132 million people over the next 10 years or so. It will hit 157 million by the year 2050. You are over 1/3 of this country's population. Older Americans, age 50 and older, you have a significant influence, impact on our society. You should not be told that you are unimportant, that you're dinosaurs, that you are this or that you're that. You are an economic juggernaut, and you have a very important role to play in your grandchildren's lives. This growth, again, looking at it from an economic point of view, which is what the AARP is doing here, the growth means more collective spending power. 56 cents of every dollar spent in the United States in 2018 came from someone 50 and older. It's people that are 50 and older. You've accumulated savings. You have developed businesses. You are powerful, and you can control what goes on in our country to a large extent. You don't have to cater to all of the young people out there that are claiming to be LGBTQ or trans or whatever it may be. Grandparents, you know that a lot of this stuff is garbage, and you are needed to help bring about sanity into our world, into our society. From an economic point of view, once again, 56 cents of every dollar is spent by somebody aged 50 and older. The study finds in 2050, that number is projected to be 61 cents of every dollar. Grandparents, you are an economic force in the society. But the second thing that the report really focused on was this. Caregivers who are 50 and over comprise a $604 billion invisible workforce. Invisible workforce. What did they mean by that? When they talked about the value of unpaid caregiving that you did in 2018, again, these figures are a little bit dated. Adult caregiving, you contributed $260 billion worth of unpaid services for taking care of older parents and other adults. You also contributed another $344 billion of unpaid caregiving to children. Together, that was $604 billion that you contributed in the year 2018. That number has continued to grow. In addition to that, you had other volunteering of $140 billion that took place in 2018. So the grand total of people 50 and above in unpaid services that you rendered to our society that benefit all of our society, benefits our families, benefits our society, was approximately $745 billion. You may not be paid directly, but older adults acting as caregivers for loved ones are providing valuable services. Again, worth about an estimated $604 billion in 2018 alone. As family caregivers, you tend to take care of the daily needs of your aging parents. Some support their partners. As family caregivers, you tend to the daily needs of your aging parents, support their partners, from injured veterans to others managing others with disabilities, and some even serve as legal guardians for their grandchildren whose parents may be victims of the opioid crisis. Susan Reinhardt, AARP Senior Vice President and Director of the AARP Public Policy Institute, said this: "The country cannot afford for unpaid caregivers to walk off the job. Grandparents, people age 50 or older, You have a vital role in our society. We cannot afford to have you walk off the job. And this is what's so distressing when states make policies against grandparents. Well, grandparents should have no right to their grandchildren. And yet, when there is an opioid crisis that hits, who did they call upon? Grandparents to come to the rescue to take care of their grandchildren. So if the state needs you, you're valuable. If the state doesn't need you, they can neglect you and they can tell you you have no rights to your grandchildren. This is the utter hypocrisy that our state policy sometimes foists upon our society, and in particular upon grandparents. In the absence of your contributions, the cost of society and to government more specifically would skyrocket. The report says, the study urges policymakers and employers to find ways to better support older adults who have caregiver duties. For instance, Reinhardt says that more employees should offer paid leave for caregiving or flexible work hours. The Caregiver Advise, Record, and Enable, the CARE Act, says this, requires hospitals to provide more information and support to caregivers, has been passed by 40 states. Whether you want to say that paid leave should be part of this whole program is not an issue that I have to be concerned about right now. The bigger issue is this. Why are states telling grandparents that they're unimportant? Why are states enacting laws and statutes that keep grandparents out of their children's lives? Why aren't churches stepping up and supporting grandparents to be actively involved in their grandchildren's lives? On September the 10th, 2023, if you go to church, ask yourself this. Did your pastor preach on Grandparents' Day today? Did they acknowledge grandparents? Grandparents, you have a very important and fundamental role in our society that you need to play, regardless of what our state says and regardless of the neglect by our churches. Step up in spite of them. In fact, I would say gather together as a force and demand change. If you do not make the change now, while you can, it's going to get worse in future generations. Grandparents, unite. Grandparents, you are an economic juggernaut. You have power and influence. Make sure that you use it to benefit your children, your grandchildren, and our society in future generations. The third thing this report found was this. The spending and labor of people 50 plus support 88.6 million jobs. 88.6 million jobs. Imagine if you were as unimportant as people say that you are. 88.6 million jobs would be lacking your support. This equals, as they say here, 44% of the total employment in 2018, both through the jobs they hold themselves and those that are created due to their spending. Older adults help drive the nation's workforce. Certain fields stand out for employing experienced workers. The healthcare sector employed over 7.3 million older adults in 2018. That field is projected to grow in the coming years, meaning even more demand for experienced workers, the study says. There is a similar shortage in education, which employs 5.1 million people 50 and older. Teacher shortages, an estimated 112,000 positions in 2018 alone, might mean more demand for older adults. And adults ages 55 to 64 comprise roughly 25% of new entrepreneurs in 2018, the highest share of any group. Starting businesses creates jobs for some while providing valuable products and services to others. Grandparents and those 50 and above, you have a very important role in our society. But more important even to the role you play in society is the role that you play in the lives of your grandchildren. And you need to make sure that you're stepping up to it. And in a state like in Texas, where they try to deprive grandparents the ability to see their grandchildren, often because of a child custody situation, often because of a divorce, often because a child is born outside of wedlock, an entire side of a family is cut off. Grandparents, you are powerful beyond anything that you can imagine. You can contact your legislators. You have so much economic power in the political process. You could get legislators out of office immediately if they are not supporting you and helping you see your grandchildren. The fourth and final point that this report really is emphasizing is the market needs to catch up to the needs of the 50-plus population. The bad news is that attitudes and stereotypes about aging have not changed, the study says, and many products and services available to us as we age are woefully out of date. As all generations navigate making the most of a longer life, new products and services are required, says the CS. Market innovation is essential, and it's basically talking about how this is more for marketers, for people in the business sector. Start thinking about older adults, about products that could be made, innovations that could be made in technology, innovations to help parents. I have aging parents. My father's died, my mother is in her 80s, my stepfather is approaching 80. Lots of issues that come up when you are aging that we are not yet solving. So if you're in the market, if you're in innovation, think about this. You have a whole untapped market. But when it comes down to the importance of grandparents in the lives of children, which is what I want to focus on Grandparents' Day, your role in the lives of your grandchildren is much more important than even your economic contributions to our society. And you should be holding your legislators accountable. You should be contacting them on a daily basis if necessary and demand that they make changes, because you are that crucial to your grandchildren. Personally, from one of the things that I can report on, I have 7 grandchildren. As of this past year, I now see 3 of them. There are still 4 that I've been unable to see, and this has largely been because of a state that has antiquated laws that have been put into place. So yes, I'm fighting for grandparents' rights. I fight for parental rights for both mother and father. I fight for children's rights, for grandchildren's rights. And today I want to say that I'm also fighting for grandparents' rights. Grandparents have a very important role to play in grandchildren. And in our state, especially in Texas, we are looking for legislators to stand up, to speak up, to represent grandparents. I know one of our senators here, Senator Angela Paxton, great senator. She talks about how wonderful it is for her to be a grandmother. She loves her grandchildren. Angela Paxton has done some great things this past session. She's a wonderful senator. I'm hoping that maybe she will sponsor some legislation that will help grandparents going forth. And I'm going to be talking with Angela, I hope, this upcoming weekend. Grandparents, whether you know Angela Paxton or not, is immaterial to me. You have your own legislator. You have a representative. You have a senator. You have both of them. Some of you have direct connections to the governor. The governor has put some things in place when he was Attorney General that I thought he made some pretty terrible opinions on. That's my opinion. That basically kick grandparents out of children's lives in a number of instances. They used Troxel versus Granville. I think Troxel versus Granville has been misused. But grandparents, you have the economic power. You can force change in this society. You don't just have to listen to the woke people and let them make change. You have the power. You have the economic power, you have the connections, you have the experience, you have stability, you have much smarter minds than many people. You can make change. So I'm asking you, grandparents, so for grandparents, number one, I honor you on Grandparents' Day. For those of you who see your grandchildren, enjoy it. Be a positive influence to your grandchildren. To those of you who can't see all of your grandchildren, I'm in that situation. Keep on fighting to make change. For those of you who maybe can't see your grandchildren at all, come and join us. We are in here in the process of making change for our society, and more importantly than that, our children and our grandchildren in particular. Society is built upon strong families. When you have policies that destroy families, when you have government agencies that encourage grandparents being kicked out of the children's life, something is wrong. When you have legislators making statutes, passing statutes that basically restrict grandparents' rights, something is wrong. When you have homeschooling associations, such as the Texas Homeschool Coalition, basically trying to say that grandparents shouldn't have these rights, something is wrong with that. Something is wrong. Many of you know how important your grandparents were in your life. I know how important my grandparents were in my life. And we need to be fighting so that our grandchildren will know that we were on the forefront making change in the state of Texas, and that they will know that we loved them so much and cared for them so much that we fought until we won and made changes for their behalf. Happy Grandparents' Day to all grandparents out there. God bless you all.